My son threw me out of the house I built with my own two hands and kept every single asset I ever owned, just so he could hand everything over to his brand new wife. "You have exactly 90 minutes to pack your things and get out," he said, his voice completely cold and flat. "I've already had all the locks changed." I stood there at 72 years old, expecting at least a tiny bit of compassion after 45 years of nothing but sacrifice for him. But I found only pure cruelty. All I had left in the entire world was one worn-out, faded green debit card that had belonged to my late wife, Eleanor. I honestly believed that card was completely empty and worthless. But when I walked into the Pacific Northwest Bank branch in downtown Seattle that cold October morning, the young teller's face suddenly turned ghostly white. "Sir, please don't move. Just stay right there," he whispered in panic. "I have to get my manager immediately." He almost ran across the lobby, and within seconds, the branch manager was hurrying toward me. I was absolutely shocked when I discovered what my quiet, humble wife had been secretly doing for more than 35 years. If you're watching this story, please subscribe to the channel, like button, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. The gentle, rhythmic scrape of sandpaper against fresh walnut filled the small workshop behind the Seattle home I had called mine for the past 45 years. At 72, my weathered hands still moved with the steady precision of a master craftsman, smoothing the final imperfections from what would be my very last handmade piece. A beautiful rocking chair with hand-carved roses on every armrest. I paused for a moment, running my rough fingers along the smooth wood, feeling 45 years of sawdust and sweat in every grain. Every single beam in this house, every shingle on the roof, every nail had been placed by these same hands. Every corner of this property held memories of the family I had raised here together with my beloved Eleanor. Then I heard the workshop door creak open. "Dad, we need to talk," my son Ryan said, his voice cutting through the peaceful silence like a blade. I looked up and saw him standing in the doorway wearing a $4,000 suit that looked completely out of place among the wood shavings. Behind him stood Brooke Harrington, Ryan's new wife of barely 8 months, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming impatiently against a $5,000 designer purse. I set down my sandpaper, wiped my hands on my apron, and forced a tired smile, though something in Ryan's expression made my chest tighten with dread. "Of course, son," I said as calmly as I could. "What's on your mind?" Ryan stepped fully into the workshop, his jaw locked in that same stubborn way I remembered from his teenage years. Only now it was harder, colder, merciless. "Dad, I need you to understand something very clearly," he began, his voice carrying a finality that made my blood freeze. "Brooke and I are starting our own family now. We need space, real space, complete privacy." I opened my mouth to say the house was more than big enough for all of us, but Ryan cut me off with one sharp, angry gesture. "No, Dad, you don't understand at all," he snapped. "I need you to move out today. Right now." The words hit me like a physical punch straight to the heart. I gripped the edge of my workbench so hard my knuckles went white. "Move out, son. This is my home. Our home. I built this house with my own hands long before you were even born." Brooke stepped forward then, flashing an artificial, plastic smile that never reached her eyes. "Joseph, surely you can see this is for the best," she said in her fake, sweet voice. "Ryan has worked so incredibly hard to build his company, and we really do need the space for our future children. This workshop, this house. Your mother and I built every single inch together," I said, my voice starting to shake. "Every room holds 45 years of memories with Eleanor." Ryan's expression didn't soften one bit. If anything, it grew even harder. "Mom's been gone 4 whole years. Dad, it's time to move on." He straightened his silk tie the way he always did when he was preparing to deliver bad news in a boardroom. I've already looked into some very nice assisted living facilities for you. My voice rose in disbelief and anger. I don't need assisted living. I'm 72. Not 97. I built this house. I still maintain this house. Every single repair for the last 45 years has been done by these hands. The silence that followed was heavier than any piece of lumber I had ever carried. Ryan looked me straight in the eye, completely unmoved. Dad, I've made my decision, he said in a flat, businesslike tone. You have 90 minutes to pack whatever you need. I'll give you 7 days to arrange for the rest of your things. I stared at my only child in absolute horror, feeling something deep inside my chest actually break. 90 minutes to leave the home I had built with my own hands. Ryan turned to leave the workshop, then paused in the doorway without even looking back. And Dad, I've already had every lock on the property changed. Don't bother trying to come back tonight. The cruelty of those final words hurt worse than anything else he had said. I sank down onto the old wooden stool that Eleanor used to sit on while she watched me work, her gentle voice filling this shop with stories, laughter, and love for decades. 90 minutes later, I found myself standing on the wet sidewalk in the cold Seattle rain, clutching one battered duffel bag that now held 45 years of my life reduced to a few changes of clothes and some old photographs. The October wind cut straight through my flannel shirt while I stood there completely lost. More lost than I had felt since Eleanor's funeral 4 years earlier. My hands shook as I opened my worn leather wallet and counted the few crumpled bills inside. Barely enough for 3 or 4 nights in the cheapest motel I could find. Then, as my fingers moved through the compartments, they brushed against something I had completely forgotten about. There it was, Eleanor's faded green debit card, still carrying her name, untouched in my wallet for the last 4 years. Eleanor had always been quietly secretive about what she called her little investments. I had never paid much attention because she handled every penny of the household finances while I focused on my carpentry work. Maybe there's still something left on it. I whispered to the empty, rainy street, holding that worn plastic card in my trembling fingers like a drowning man clutching a lifeline. The next morning, I walked into the Pacific Northwest Bank branch on 3rd Avenue, cold, exhausted, and unshaven after a sleepless night in a $32 motel room. Staring at the water-stained ceiling and trying to understand how my entire life had collapsed in just 90 minutes. That faded green card felt like literally my last hope in the world. Maybe Eleanor had left enough for a security deposit on a tiny studio apartment somewhere. I approached the teller windows and deliberately chose the youngest one, hoping he would be patient with an old man fumbling with what was probably an ancient, expired account. Good morning, sir. How can I help you today? The nameplate read, Matthew Lawson. I slid the worn card across the counter, suddenly embarrassed by how beat up and faded it looked. I'd like to check the balance on this account. Please, it belonged to my late wife, Eleanor Coleman. Matthew picked up this card and started typing on his computer. Everything seemed perfectly routine for the first few seconds. Then something changed dramatically. His typing slowed, then stopped completely. His eyebrows drew together in obvious confusion. Then his face went completely pale. Is there a problem? I asked, my heart sinking into my boots. Matthew looked up at me, then back at the screen, then back at me again. Sir, I need to get my manager right now. Please, just give me 1 moment. He stood up quickly and walked fast toward a glass office at the back. Through the glass walls, I could see him speaking urgently to a middle-aged woman in a sharp navy suit. She looked up sharply, her eyes immediately finding me across the banking floor. Within moments, she was walking straight toward me with purpose. Her nameplate read, Rebecca Thompson, branch manager, Mr. Coleman. she said, extending her hand with a careful but professional smile. Would you mind if we spoke privately in my office? This account requires some very special handling. My stomach dropped straight to the floor. Special handling. Is there some kind of problem with the account? Rebecca's smile stayed calm and measured. Not a problem at all. Sir, quite the opposite. I promise you. She led me into her office, closed the door softly, and continued. I've been with this bank for 19 years, and I have honestly never seen anything quite like this particular account. Before we go any further, I need to verify a few details. Your wife was Eleanor Coleman, correct? And she passed away approximately 4 years ago, yes? I answered quietly. Cancer. But I don't understand any of this. She never mentioned any special accounts. We lived very modestly. I've always just been a carpenter. Rebecca exchanged a quick glance with Matthew, then turned her computer monitor all the way around so I could see it clearly. Sir, your wife was apparently much more than that, she said softly. The screen began filling with numbers, investment accounts, stock portfolios, real estate holdings across Washington, Oregon, California, and Texas. My hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly I thought the wood might crack. Numbers kept appearing. Numbers with more zeros than I had ever dreamed possible in my entire life. Rebecca watched me carefully and asked, Mr. Coleman, are you feeling all right? I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the screen as the figures kept climbing higher and higher. My modest carpenter's salary had always been our only visible income, or so I had believed for 45 years. But here, displayed in cold black and white, was undeniable proof of something else entirely. Investments in companies I had heard of on the news but never imagined we could own. Stock purchases dating back to the late 1980s. Real estate deeds in multiple states. Eleanor, I finally whispered, my voice barely audible in the quiet office. What did you do down in the bank's private vault? Rebecca handed me a thick cream envelope that had been waiting untouched in Eleanor's safety deposit box for the last 4 years. My hands trembled so badly I could barely break the old-fashioned wax seal. I immediately recognized my wife's careful, beautiful handwriting on the first page. My dearest Joseph, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you, and you have found yourself in a situation where you truly need this anchor I prepared so many years ago. I had to stop reading for a moment, wiping tears from my eyes because even in death, Eleanor's gentle, wise voice came through as clearly as if she were sitting right beside me. You probably think I was just your simple wife who clipped coupons, baked apple pies, and tended the rose garden. She wrote, but Joseph, every single night after you fell asleep exhausted from the workshop, I was reading about technology, about companies that were going to change the world forever. Memories flooded back instantly. Eleanor sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by newspapers and financial reports, always asking me innocent questions about those computer companies while I smiled and told her I was better with wood than with stocks. Never once realizing she was quietly building our future while I built furniture. Starting in 1987, the letter explained, she began investing tiny amounts she saved from the household budget and from selling her handmade quilts at the Saturday market. Sometimes $500, sometimes $1,500 at a time. She bought shares in Apple, Microsoft, Amazon the day it went public, Google, Tesla, and dozens more. You used to tease me about my little investments. Remember, she wrote with that familiar warmth? Those little investments had grown decade after decade into the staggering fortune now displayed on Rebecca's computer screen upstairs. Then the tone of the letter changed and grew serious. Joseph, I saw how money changes people. I watched it happen to families right here in our neighborhood, and I saw the early warning signs in our own son. I remembered those conversations now with painful clarity. Ryan, in his late 20s, suddenly obsessed with status symbols, expensive watches, luxury cars, the biggest house on the block. Eleanor had tried gently to warn me, but I had dismissed it as normal ambition for a young man. I saw it in Ryan's eyes. That hunger. The letter continued. The way he began measuring success only in dollars. The way he looked at our house and mentally calculated its resale value. Eleanor had predicted yesterday's betrayal many years before it actually happened. So I created this anchor, my love, not to spoil you, but to make absolutely certain you would have options when you felt cornered and powerless. She explained that she deliberately designed the account to stay hidden and only become fully accessible in real desperation, because she knew my pride would never allow me to accept charity, even from my own wife. The final paragraph made fresh tears fall onto the paper. Don't let him destroy what we built together. Joseph, this money is not just numbers. It is 45 years of love, sacrifice, and every dream we ever shared. Use this gift wisely. Protect our legacy, and please, my love, do not let greed win. Forever yours, Eleanor. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it against my chest, as if I could still hold her one more time. Rebecca sat quietly across from me in the vault, giving me all the time I needed to process everything. I won't let you down. Eleanor, I whispered to the empty air. As I tucked the letter into my jacket pocket, a new, ice-cold determination settled deep in my chest. Eleanor had given me the tools I needed, but she had also given me a clear warning about our son years before I was willing to see it myself. If Ryan had betrayed me so completely and so easily, what else was he capable of first? I needed to know exactly what Ryan was really doing with his company, Horizon Tech Solutions. 3 days later, I sat across from Christopher Walsh, a private investigator and former Seattle police detective who now specialized in corporate fraud and white-collar crime. Mr. Coleman, Christopher said seriously, will examine contracts, client relationships, banking records, everything. But I have to warn you, sometimes families discover things they wish they never knew. I thought about Eleanor's letter again and answered firmly, I need to know the truth, no matter how painful. Over the next 10 days, Christopher worked methodically and relentlessly. He followed Ryan to client meetings all over the city, interviewed former employees in coffee shops and parking lots, and pulled every public record he could access. The first major red flag appeared quickly. Horizon Tech Solutions had lost 5 major clients in the past 8 months alone. A children's hospital network, a regional credit union, a large port logistics company, a national pharmacy chain, and a statewide health insurance provider. All of them terminated contracts early and demanded immediate refunds. Former employees painted a terrifyingly consistent picture. Ryan had been wildly overpromising advanced software solutions his team could never actually deliver. He would collect 60 to 85% of the contract value up front, then delay, make excuses, and stall for months or years. When angry clients finally threatened legal action, he blamed unforeseen technical difficulties or supply chain issues. Christopher obtained internal emails where Ryan personally ordered employees to falsify progress reports, create fake demo videos, and lie directly to clients about timelines. There were invoices for expensive software licenses that were never actually purchased, timesheets claiming hundreds of hours of work that never happened. Then came the truly damning evidence. Ryan had been producing completely fabricated financial statements to show potential new investors, claiming millions in revenue that simply did not exist while hiding massive client losses and refunds. Christopher placed thick folder after thick folder on the table between us. Joseph, your son is not just failing at business. He is deliberately committing fraud on a massive scale. Wire fraud, investor fraud, mail fraud, all federal crimes. My hands shook uncontrollably as I looked through page after page of proof. One children's hospital had paid Ryan $850,000 for a new patient management system that was never delivered. The credit union paid $420,000 for upgraded security software that turned out to be a $7,000 program Ryan simply rebranded. The port logistics company paid $690,000 for inventory tracking software that was subcontracted overseas for only $30,000, while Ryan pocketed the difference. Christopher continued laying out the evidence calmly and methodically. Ryan had diverted millions in client upfront payments to personal expenses. Brooke's endless shopping sprees. A new Porsche 911, a 55-foot yacht. A second vacation home on Lake Washington. Private jet rentals. 5-star vacations in Hawaii and the Caribbean. Bank statements showed Ryan now owed creditors nearly $5.7 million. And Horizon Tech Solutions had almost no real assets left to cover any of it. Here's the worst part, Christopher said, pulling out the final folder. Ryan has been using the company's reputation to secure massive personal loans, claiming the business itself as collateral. And the whole house of cards is about to come crashing down any day now. I felt physically sick to my stomach, looking at emails where Ryan bragged to Brooke about stupid clients who pay millions up front for nothing but promises. Another email chain showed him laughing about how easy it was to keep the marks on the hook while he spent their money. This was not business failure. This was calculated, deliberate theft on a breathtaking scale. 1 week later, I sat in the downtown law office of Alexander Bennett, a corporate attorney with 40 years of experience who had been personally recommended by Rebecca at the bank. Alexander reviewed every page of Christopher's evidence binder, then looked up at me with a calm, confident expression. Joseph, Horizon Tech Solutions currently owes Pacific Northwest Bank $4.3 million. They have been late on payments for 5 straight months, and the bank is terrified of total default. He leaned forward and continued. Banks hate holding toxic commercial loans. So here is our move. We create a brand new shell company called Rainier Capital LLC, 100% owned by you. And we purchase Horizon's entire debt from the bank at 68 cents on the dollar. Once Rainier Capital owned the debt, I would instantly become Ryan's primary creditor and gain complete control over his company without him ever knowing who was really behind the new owner. Alexander explained every step in detail, and over the next 4 days he worked with precision. He formed Rainier Capital LLC, opened corporate banking accounts, and contacted Pacific Northwest Bank's commercial lending division directly. The bank jumped at the offer. They wanted this ticking time bomb off their books immediately. They agreed to sell the $4.3 million debt for $2.9 million cash, a discount of over 30%. I signed every document with a completely steady hand, thinking constantly of Eleanor's letter about protecting our legacy. This was not revenge. This was justice, pure and simple. Ryan had stolen from innocent clients, lied to investors, and betrayed everything we had ever taught him about honest work. The wire transfer completed late Friday afternoon. Within an hour, Alexander's phone rang with confirmation. It's done. Joseph, Pacific Northwest Bank has officially transferred 100% of Horizon's debt to Rainier Capital LLC. He handed me an additional thick stack of paperwork he had already prepared. I also filed the documents to convert that debt to equity. As of this moment, you personally own 87% of Horizon Tech Solutions. I held the fresh ownership certificates in my hands, feeling their weight for the first time. My son had absolutely no idea that his fate now rested entirely in my hands. Ryan still believed he was desperately searching for new investors to save his sinking company. He had been making frantic phone calls and scheduling urgent meetings all week, completely unaware that his largest creditor had just changed forever, and that his new creditor knew every dark secret he had. Alexander leaned back in his chair and asked, "So, Joseph, what is your next move?" I looked out his window toward the downtown Seattle skyline, where Ryan's company occupied 3 full floors of a gleaming glass tower. He was probably up there right that minute making more false promises to someone new, spinning the same web of lies he had been telling for years. The irony hit me like a wave. 10 days ago, Ryan had thrown me out of my own home because he thought I was weak and powerless. Today, I owned the company he had built entirely on theft and deception. "Now comes the hard part," I said quietly, folding the ownership documents with care. Ryan had betrayed not just me, but every single client who had ever trusted him with their money and their future. The children's hospital still had no patient management system. The credit union's security was still vulnerable. The port was still losing thousands of dollars every single day because of Ryan's lies. But now, for the first time, I had the power to make everything right again. It was time to face my son. The next morning, Ryan received an anonymous phone call from an investor representative, claiming a major new backer wanted an immediate meeting and was ready to rescue Horizon Tech Solutions with a massive cash infusion. Alexander had arranged everything through trusted intermediaries, so Ryan would never suspect. I arrived at the Horizon building early, took the private elevator straight to the 24th floor, and walked into the executive conference room. I deliberately sat with my back to the door, facing the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Elliott Bay. Ryan entered the room full of confidence. Expensive Italian loafers clicking on the marble floor. Leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "Good morning," he said to my back in his smoothest CEO voice. "Ryan Harrington, CEO of Horizon Tech Solutions. Thank you so much for coming on such short notice." I turned the chair slowly and looked him straight in the eye. "Hello, son." Ryan's leather portfolio slipped from his fingers and crashed to the table, papers exploding everywhere. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and pure terror in less than 3 seconds. "Dad, what? What are you doing here? This is my investor meeting." I stayed perfectly calm and slid the ownership certificates across the polished table. "Actually, Ryan, this is our meeting. I am the investor, or more accurately, I am now the majority owner of Horizon Tech Solutions." Ryan's hands shook violently as he picked up the documents and tried to read them, whispering over and over, "This is impossible. This is impossible. You're just a carpenter. You don't have this kind of money." I opened Christopher's thick investigation binder and began laying out every piece of evidence in perfect order. "Your mother was extraordinary, son. She saw things in you that I was too blind to notice years ago. And she taught me how to protect what we built together." One by one, I placed the damning documents in front of him. The children's hospital that never received its $850,000 system. The credit union that got a $7,000 rebranded program instead of real security. The port that lost $690,000 on software that was never built. "Dad, I can explain everything," Ryan stammered, his voice cracking for the first time. I continued without pause. "The pharmacy chain that paid $480,000 for inventory software that was subcontracted overseas for $28,000, while you kept the rest." My voice stayed completely steady. "How many clients trusted you while you bought Brook Diamond jewelry, a yacht, and a second mansion on the lake?" Ryan's CEO mask shattered completely. He looked like a frightened little boy. "It's not what it looks like. Business is complicated. Sometimes you have to make promises to secure funding." I pulled out the final, most devastating evidence. Printouts of Ryan's own emails to Brooke bragging about stupid clients who pay millions up front for nothing but promises. Ryan read his own words in black and white. His shoulders sagged, and the last of his arrogance drained away. What do you want from me?" he finally whispered, barely audible. I closed the folders and looked my son directly in the eyes. Really looked at him for the first time in years. Somewhere along the way, the little boy I had taught to swing a hammer had turned into a stranger I no longer recognized. I want you to understand that actions have real consequences. Ryan, you threw me out of my home because you thought I was powerless and old. You stole from innocent people for exactly the same reason. I stood up slowly and walked toward the conference room door. Then I turned back one last time. You have exactly 24 hours to decide. Face the consequences like a man and make every single client whole again, or I hand everything I have to the federal authorities. Either way, the people you stole from will get their money back. I left him sitting alone at that long table, hands shaking as he stared at the wreckage of his life. 24 hours came and went. Ryan never called, never texted, never tried to make things right. Instead, I sat in the FBI field office in downtown Seattle across from Special Agent Melissa Chen, a sharp-eyed veteran of white-collar crime investigations. I slid Christopher's complete evidence binder across her desk. Agent Chen, my son has defrauded multiple organizations out of millions of dollars through deliberate wire fraud and embezzlement, I said, my voice steady and clear. Those clients deserve justice, and other people need to be protected from him. Agent Chen spent more than an hour reviewing every document, every email, every falsified invoice. Mr. Coleman, this is one of the most complete fraud cases I've ever seen presented by a private citizen, she said finally. These email chains alone show clear criminal intent. We will be opening a full federal investigation immediately. 2 days later, 5 unmarked black SUVs pulled up in front of the Horizon Tech Solutions building. Dozens of FBI agents and windbreakers marched through the lobby with a search warrant. 25 minutes later, Ryan was led out in handcuffs, his face hidden from the news cameras while reporters shouted questions. Brooke stood in the background, clutching her designer purse in absolute panic, then hired her own criminal attorney the very next morning and publicly distanced herself from Ryan completely. The trial lasted 4.5 months. I attended every single day, sitting quietly in the back row as prosecutor after prosecutor laid out the mountain of evidence. Client after client took the stand and told their stories. Hospitals that couldn't treat children properly. Credit unions exposed to hackers. Businesses losing thousands of dollars every day because of Ryan's lies. Ryan's defense team tried to paint him as an overambitious entrepreneur who simply made mistakes under pressure. But the evidence was overwhelming and airtight. When the jury returned after only 2.5 hours of deliberation, with a verdict of guilty on all 28 counts, I felt no joy, only deep, aching sadness. The judge's voice was stern during sentencing. Mr. Harrington, you systematically defrauded trusting clients, stealing money that was meant to improve health care, protect financial security, and keep businesses running. Your actions damaged not only bank accounts but faith in honest business itself. Ryan was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $3.8 million in restitution. I watched my son's shoulders shake with silent sobs as the gavel fell. This was the same little boy I had once taught to measure twice and cut once. The same boy who used to fall asleep on my lap in the workshop while I carved toy boats for him. After the marshal led him away, I walked slowly out of the courthouse alone. The prison transport van waited at the bottom of the steps. Through the reinforced windows, I could just make out Ryan's silhouette. No longer the confident CEO in a $5,000 suit, but a convicted felon in an orange jumpsuit beginning a journey he had chosen with every single lie. As the van pulled away into Seattle traffic, I stood on the courthouse steps and whispered to the cold wind. Maybe this is what he needs to finally learn. 6 months later, I received the first letter from Ryan on official prison stationery. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it, recognizing his handwriting instantly. Dad, it began. I finally understand what I lost. Not just money or freedom, but your trust, Mom's values, and every single thing you and she ever tried to teach me. I've had 6 months of silence to think, and I am ashamed. Not because I got caught, but because I became someone you never raised me to be. The letter described his daily routine in the federal facility in Sheridan, Oregon. He had enrolled in the prison's vocational carpentry program on day 1. The instructor, Mr. Alvarez, keeps saying measure twice, cut once, exactly like you used to. Dad, I never listened back then. I was always rushing to the next bigger thing. 3 weeks later, I drove down I-5 for our first in-person visit. Ryan walked into the visiting room thinner, wearing standard prison khakis, his hair cut short, and most importantly, the old arrogance completely gone from his eyes, replaced by something that looked very much like genuine humility. Dad, he said quietly as he sat down across the scratched table. Thank you for coming. I don't expect forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. His voice broke. I stole from sick children, from working families, from you. I stole the son you thought you had raised. I looked at him for a long time and finally answered. Justice had to be served. Ryan, but you are still my boy. Focus on becoming the man your mother would be proud of. He told me he had started writing personal apology letters to every single client he had defrauded, not asking for forgiveness, just taking full responsibility. He talked about the woodworking shop, how the smell of sawdust reminded him of our old workshop every single day, how he was finally learning patience, precision, and the real value of honest work. Meister, Alvarez says I have natural talent, he said with a small, sad smile. Guess it runs in the family after all. What are your plans when you get out? I asked. Ryan straightened up as much as the prison table allowed. I want to work, Dad. Real work with my hands. Pay back every single penny I stole, even if it takes the rest of my life. Maybe construction. Maybe carpentry. Something honest where I build things instead of tearing them down. I searched his face for any trace of the old manipulation, but all I saw was raw remorse and a man finally beginning to understand the depth of what he had done. The children's hospital got their new system, I told him quietly. The credit union has real security now. Every single client you hurt has been made whole again. Ryan's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Dad. I know that was you, not just the restitution order. You didn't have to do that. I looked at him and answered, yes, I did. It was the right thing to do. As the guard signaled the end of visiting time, Ryan stood up slowly. Dad, I know I have no right to ask this, but when I get out, could I maybe work with you? Learn the trade properly this time. I looked at my son and saw, for the first time in years, a faint glimpse of the little boy I once knew. We'll see. Ryan, I said softly, just keep becoming the man your mother always believed you could be. Driving home that day, something shifted inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. Real hope. Ryan was learning, growing, changing behind those walls in ways I never thought possible. He's learning. Eleanor, I whispered to the empty car as the Seattle skyline came back into view. 2.5 years later, on a crisp, sunny October morning, the Coleman Second Chance Center officially opened its doors in the Rainier Valley neighborhood of South Seattle. I stood on the sidewalk in front of the beautiful new brick building holding oversized ceremonial scissors while local news cameras rolled and a small crowd cheered. The entire center had been built with Eleanor's hidden fortune, transformed from numbers on a screen into something real, something that would last for generations. This center represents second chances, I told the crowd. my voice thick with emotion. It is for anyone who wants to learn a new skill, find honest work, or simply discover that it is never too late to start over with dignity. Inside, the bright workshop smelled of fresh sawdust and possibility, exactly like my old garage used to. There were woodworking stations, plumbing and electrical classrooms, computer labs, and spaces for small business training. Ryan had been released 4 months earlier after serving 3.5 years and earning every possible reduction for good behavior and program completion. True to his word, he had continued writing apology letters from prison and had enrolled in every rehabilitation class available. Now he worked as the center's lead carpentry instructor and program coordinator. I watched from the doorway as he patiently helped Mr. Jenkins, a 75-year-old former truck driver, measure a board for the 3rd time. "Remember, sir, measure twice. Cut once," Ryan said gently. No trace of the old arrogance anywhere. Our first graduating class was small but life-changing. 15 students aged 58 to 81. Every single one of them found real employment or started their own small business within weeks. Mrs. Thompson now runs a successful furniture refinishing company. Mr. Park opened a handyman service that stays booked solid at the end of each day, after the last student left and the tools were put away. I sat alone in my office looking at the framed wedding photo of Eleanor on my desk. She smiled back at me with the same wise, gentle eyes that had guided her secret investments all those decades ago. "Thank you, Eleanor," I whispered to the photograph. "Your legacy lives on, not in money, but in every single person who walks through these doors and finds hope again." Outside, Seattle's evening lights began to twinkle across Puget Sound. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new opportunities for people to rebuild their lives with honesty and purpose. The Coleman Second Chance Center had become exactly what Eleanor had always envisioned, an anchor for anyone who needed stability, a place where honest work was celebrated, and where second chances were not just possible, they were guaranteed. Looking back on my journey now, I realize that sometimes the hardest and most painful lessons come from the people we love the most. My story is not really about betrayal or revenge. It is about understanding that true wealth is measured in character, not bank accounts. When Ryan threw me out of the home I built with my own hands, he thought he was simply removing an obstacle. What he never realized was that he was destroying the very foundation of everything we had ever given him. But here's what I learned, and what I want every father and every son to understand. Sometimes the darkest moments are transformed into the greatest opportunities for redemption. When I found Eleanor's letter and discovered her secret fortune, I knew a higher power had given me the tools not just for justice, but for healing. And when Ryan finally learned humility behind prison walls and began to change, I saw that same higher power working in ways I could never have predicted. The stories that matter most are never about money or success. They are about second chances and the courage to rebuild what has been broken. That is why I share my story, because real wisdom comes from lived experience. My advice to every parent and every child is simple: never wait for a crisis to show your family how much they mean to you. Never let greed poison the relationships that should matter most. And always remember that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone who has hurt you is the chance to make things right. Redemption is always possible, no matter how far someone has fallen. What is your second chance story? Share it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of family, forgiveness, and finding hope even in the darkest moments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.